So this is a really wonderful session that we have today. We're going to be talking about predatory microtransit. And for those who don't know, microtransit is essentially different from fixed route buses and trains to where they're using smaller vehicles to cover a less dense area or an area that doesn't have as much ridership. And we have a really wonderful group here today that's going to describe about the issues that they've been having down in Texas. So coming to the stage is Joshua Hatton, a member of No Bus Cuts Denton, a group that is fighting against predatory microtransit in Denton, Texas. Joshua, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Bakari, and I'm joined here by other members of our committee and our campaign. Christine is a co-presenter on our presentation today, and Terrell and Kel are both with us as well. We'll talk just a little bit about our group. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get started. Here we go. Our group is No Bus Cuts Denton is a campaign. You see here our website, nobuscutsdenton.org. We just updated that last night with all of our press releases, as well as some of the recent media coverage and our recent call to join our coalition against predatory microtransit. So please check out our website, also on Facebook and Twitter at nobuscutsdenton, and our email address is nobuscutsdenton@gmail.com. Our presentation has 5 parts. First, we'll go over the basics of our campaign. Then I'll hand off to Christine to discuss our transit system in Denton County, Texas. Third, we'll talk about predatory microtransit. Fourth, we'll discuss the ways that we've fought back against this predator. And fifth, we'll talk about the ways that we hope to achieve victory over predatory microtransit. First of all, some basics about the No Bus Cuts Denton campaign. It's one of the 3 working groups that are organized by our group that's called Denton Worker. We're now approaching about 40 members. We're an independent, militant worker organization. Many of us are rank and file union members. But really more of us now are not yet unionized workers. And we're doing, in addition to our No Bus Cuts Denton campaign, we have a campaign to increase wages for student workers at University of North Texas. And you can see there, we've subvertised their logo with their eagle with a new eye. And we're also organizing Know Your Rights workshops at local churches here in Denton with the help of the Department of Labor, the NLRB, and the EEOC, the Equal Employment Commission. So we've got a lot going on, but No Bus Cuts Denton has been really the focus of our work for about the last year and a half. I will now, having talked about the basics of our group, I'm going to hand off to Christine. Christine, if you could maybe tell me when you want me to switch the slides, I'll go ahead and do that part of it, and I'll shut up and let you take the mic.
Sure. Slide, please. So just to contextualize a little bit of what we're talking about when we talk about transportation within Denton. Denton is a city in North Texas. There's kind of a triangle that's formed where Interstate 35 splits up to go to Fort Worth and Dallas, and then it rejoins up north, and where it rejoins is where Denton is. So this is a map of part of the DART network. DART is Dallas's rapid transit. And you'll notice on the northeast portion of this map here, there is a green line that extends. That is one of the DART's light rail trains, and it meets that kind of greenish yellow line that then continues up northeast off the map. That greenish yellow line there is the DCTA A train. And so that's kind of where we are in connection to Dallas. We have a single point of contact to their network, and then we have no points of contact to the Fort Worth network, at least not that are particularly good. There's a single bus that I think at points runs maybe once an hour or something. But we are kind of off on our own transit-wise, despite the fact that a lot of Denton residents will live in Denton and then go and work in Dallas or Fort Worth. And so there's kind of a lack of regional transportation mobility, which is understandable. We're a city of 140 to 180,000 residents. We're a big college town, so when college is in session, we get about 40,000 people living there for the college season, and then they leave. So we're not a massive town with a massive budget, and Texas is a very sprawling area, which we know is like expensive to serve with transit. So we don't have good regional transportation, but Denton has a dense-ish urban core that could be well served by transportation. Next slide. The problem is that we're not doing that. So this is the current bus routes. We are going to be losing 3 of these routes come January. But you'll see that there are kind of 2 portions to this network. There is a portion that is those green routes that are all centered on the southwestern portion of town. Those are all ran by DCTA, our transportation authority, for the University of North Texas. The University of North Texas pays for those routes. They plan those routes. Those routes primarily serve to get college students from their housing to UNT. If I had overlaid the grocery stores in town onto this map, you'll see that the UNT routes serve approximately none of them. That's because they're almost exclusively designed to get students to and from school. The man who runs those, Chris, he has a very limited budget that's shrinking every year. He'd like to do more, but he can't. The orange, dark red, blue, purple, and pink routes that you'll see there are our city routes. They're called Connect versus the UNT routes. And the problem with these are lots. You'll notice that there are circuitous looping routes. Those don't particularly serve people very well, because if you want to take a short trip 5 minutes down the line one way, you're going to wind up taking that hour trip back around the loop, as opposed to a route. UNT is a state university. Yes, it is a public university. Additionally, what you're not seeing here is the frequency. DCTA has said, or the board members of DCTA have said that they find 45-minute headways on buses acceptable. And if you've ever relied on transportation in your life, you know that 45-minute headways are not acceptable. The impact of this is especially felt when you're transferring. So for example, you'll notice along that red line, right south of that highway there is the Texas Women's University. If you're a Texas Women's University student living on campus and you want to go visit your friend who lives on UNT campus, you might reasonably assume that you could take that dark red line south and then take the orange line east-west. Google Maps will just tell you to walk the portion that runs along the red line because the transfer there takes so long. It takes about half an hour because of those 45-minute headways. Sometimes they overlap well, oftentimes they don't. And so that's a big problem for a network. Next slide, please. Additionally, another problem for a network, conceptually, a lot of the problems with DCTA come down to governance. We've had conservatives running our bus network for quite a while. And additionally, the structure of our transportation board, it's made up of 5 members, only one of whom represents this area that you're seeing here. One member represents Louisville, which is much more suburban than Denton. Another represents Highland Village, which is a very tiny suburb. And then 2 represent the county, which is also very suburban. And so there is an area in the DCTA network that has the capacity to be very well served by public transportation, and we get 20% of the vote on the transportation board. And so that kind of failure of governance at the top then percolated down through the entire agency to the point where, for example, when our agency talks about bus ridership, they exclude the UNT routes entirely. When you see the agency talk about, oh, we have low ridership on our buses. Our bus network is not working. We know that buses just can't work here. You know, we've put so much effort into like trying to make these things work, but nobody rides it. They are entirely excluding the UNT network. So this is the network that when DCTA talks about buses, they're talking about this. Next slide. Not this. And this gets absurdly high ridership. A lot of these routes perform really, really well. But they just are not included in our statistics. Next slide, please. So here we see the GoZone system here. GoZone is our predatory microtransit option. It is essentially an Uber that is run on the public dime. It costs 75 cents to ride, which means that everybody wants to ride it all of the time because it's 75 cents. It takes you from point A to point B. Why would you not want to use it? Well, the answer to that is that you're going to wait 30 minutes, 40 minutes for pickup, 50 minutes for pickup, and 20% of the time you're not going to get a ride. Additionally, it costs us more to provide rides via this service. And this is a statistic put together by a local activist because, again, when DCTA releases statistics like these, they are not including our UNT bus routes in these statistics. And so they say, wow, our bus system is so much more expensive to provide rides to people versus GoZone. GoZone looks like a bargain. And they're only including their very poorly planned routes that only run every 45 minutes and don't go where people want to go. They cut destinations from those, doctor's office, grocery stores, and then they say, wow, we tried to optimize the route, but even less people are using it now. And so anyways, GoZone costs way more for the service. Next slide. Next slide, please.
I'm trying to. Here we go.
Right. So here we see the scale of the problem. This is our total ridership for November 2022. And you can see that UNT routes are absolutely crushing it. They account for the majority of our ridership alone. We have multiple services. UNT routes, our predatory microtransit, our A train, our connect routes, and non-connect fixed routes services. UNT routes alone make up the majority, but they are excluded from statistics. Next slide, please. Right. So here we have the GoZone dashboard. The DCTA board actually put together a fairly well done dashboard for looking at agency statistics. And so this is pulling from that. You'll see that only 41% of GoZones in the past 3 months of GoZone rides have departed on time. 41%. Not even like a soft little weak majority of like maybe 55%, but 41%. The average time to pick up has been 23 minutes for the last 3 months. And that is including the entire day. So during rush hour, getting to work in the morning and getting back from work in the evening, these times are much, much worse. These are very much held down by midday times of a college student going to class at noon or something like that. Over on the bottom left of this, you will see the completed or the request status overview. And so completed 63% of times where people press the button in the app that says, I want a ride, it actually happens. So 3 out of 5 times that you try to get a ride with our GoZone, it will give you a ride. Seat unavailable is 11%. And again, that heavily depends on time of day. I have known multiple people who have almost lost their jobs because they're depending it, or have lost their jobs because they're depending on it for transportation to work in the morning. And they will get a notification that the ride is going to come pick them up in 20 minutes. And then it comes in 40 or 50, or they will just get flat out rejected and they are unable to get to work in the morning. Cancel is 11%. And when we talk about cancellation statistics, a lot of that is people who are told you're going to be picked up in 20 minutes. And then it pushes it back 20 minutes and then 20 minutes and they ultimately cancel. No show, 4%. There are issues with stop locations. In summary, we have a lot of issues with this service. Let me see what I have on the next slide. Right. So one of the biggest issues with this service, however, is that it is competing with our bus network. It covers exactly the same area as our bus network. What you'll see in agencies that are using microtransit successfully is that they will say, okay, well, you can use it to get to a bus stop, and then you have to take the rest of your trip by bus. That's not the case here. It essentially is Uber. You can just use it to go anywhere that the service serves. And so the result of this is that we have this little area in our downtown or around our town, where about 32% of our Go Zone rides both start and end in this area. And they are served by existing bus routes. But again, these bus routes only come every 40-45 minutes. They're unreliable. Our buses don't run late. Some of them cut off at 5 p.m. Most of them cut off at 7 p.m. And some of them don't run on Saturday or Sunday. And so what we're seeing is that we are spending more money for a service where the workers are not paid as well. They don't get benefits. The service is worse. And we could just be putting this money into our buses. So that's kind of a summary of where our network is at.
Great, Christine. Thank you so much. That was our second part of our presentation of 5. And the third part is now we get to the villain in the story, right? Predatory microtransit. Christine's kind of already told you a little bit about the problem we're facing here in Denton. Here's I promise this is the only slide with a lot of words on it like this, but I think we've taken a lot of time to define the phenomenon, and I think it's worth maybe just going through and I can read this with you. Predatory microtransit is the harmful replacement of public fixed route bus service and unionized workers with outsourced corporate on-demand rides in smaller vehicles driven by workers misclassified, we could say, as independent contractors. It is the most destructive form of the privatization of public transportation by ride-hailing companies and unscrupulous government officials. As a result of predatory microtransit, bus drivers and mechanics can lose jobs, and their transit unions lose power. Low-income riders lose access to transportation, and the communities of which they are all a part lose wealth. Predatory microtransit harms workers, riders, the community, and the environment. It harms workers really in 2 ways. First of all, the workers who are part of the public, mostly unionized workforce for transportation lose jobs as an effect of the cuts to routes. And in addition to that, the new jobs that are there for microtransit are the workers are misclassified as independent contractors. They may make $25 or $30 an hour, but they are paying $9 an hour to rent the vehicle that they use. And at least here in Denton, the company that is the subcontractor, the contractor is VIA, pays no benefits or anything like that. So financially, it's increasing precarity for workers in the transportation sector.
I would just briefly add there
Sure.
that they have an issue with getting people to come to work because it's a bad job. People don't want to show up reliably because why would they? And so the way that they've solved this, and they proudly presented this to the board as an innovative solution for this issue, is that because they're independent contractors, they just fine people if they don't show up to work.
Yeah, VIA, they're a charming bunch at VIA. Next, the harm to riders. The way that the service works in Denton, and at least in many places, is that a person to book a ride needs either to make a phone call or to have a smartphone. In many cases, you have to have a smartphone and credit card or debit card in order to be able to book a ride and get into the system. So low-income riders are harmed by predatory microtransit as well. Predatory microtransit harms the community, primarily because of the outsourcing and the use of public funds that no longer go into the pockets of workers here in Denton, for example, or in the community. It goes to the owners of Via and other massive ride-hailing companies in New York City and wherever else these multinational corporations are headquartered. So it siphons off wealth out of a community into the pockets of executives and investors in other places. And finally, an area that we just don't have the resources to look into yet is the environmental cost. The difference between, maybe Christine has looked into this more than I have, the environmental cost of having a bunch of minivans zipping around town compared with good, more efficient bus system. And one of our committee members made this great cartoon here. In general, predatory microtransit, you have at one end, it eats up bus routes, good union jobs, and rider access. And out the other end, its waste is precarious gig work, discrimination, and unsafe driving, which we will discuss in a little bit as well. So that's in general kind of what we've seen from predatory microtransit, and our research there. We've done some research on predatory microtransit in other areas. The more we look, the more we find. There are groups facing it, unions of ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union alone. We know of unions fighting it in St. Louis, in San Antonio, in Dallas. It already happened, really, and also in a local in Massachusetts. So it's a national and also I would guess probably a global phenomenon as well. We just don't have the resources to be able to do the research on that. The case in Denton County, the process has been to sabotage and then privatize. Right, you see here on the left the image. This is Route 3 on McKinney Avenue. It's in a ditch. The sign is tilting. In order to get to this, you have to go, I think it's about 40 here, isn't it? 45 speed limit on McKinney there. But it's near.
That segment is de facto 30, or sorry, is officially 30, but yeah, de facto 40, 45. And it's impossible to see in this image, but the particular road this is on is the only east-west corridor in the city for about a mile in either direction, north or south of it. And it does not have sidewalk for most of that stretch. And so we're also this is an area where we are and have built a lot of multifamily recently. So this is an area that could very easily justify the expenditure to put in nicer facilities. We just haven't done it.
And the DCTA was created in the early 2000s, and really from our bus drivers who are part of our committee have told us very, very much about the sabotage and the mismanagement. It's been money is wasted. You can see, I think in terms of bus shelters and things like that, there are very few in Denton. It's a crummy system, and it has been for a long time. But then, of course, in true neoliberal fashion, they run down the public agency and then say, well, the private sector can solve all our problems. I'm sure you've heard that before from other examples in other fields. I'm going to give kind of a basic outline, a timeline of the process of predatory microtransit here in Denton County. Really, in 2019 is when the DCTA put out a call for proposals and bids on what they called mobility as a service kind of model of transportation management. One of the groups that got one of the initial funds there was Via. In 2021, in January, the DCTA board awarded a contract to Via for the GO Zone microtransit system, which we've been showing you. After a 6-month period required, I understand, by Title VI and the Civil Rights Act, the DCTA board, after this period of input, they called it, they signed a contract with VIA for around $34 million for a 3-year contract. Since the beginning, the aim for DCTA, its chair, Chris Watts, a former mayor of Denton, was to replace the bus system, the fixed route bus system. Initially, the plan was to cut all, but there were 8 routes in the start of this in 2021. The plan was to cut 6 immediately, and then another 2 potentially after another kind of 90-day period. But their aim from the beginning has been cut the fixed route system, replace with microtransit. After the contract was signed, in fact, at the same meeting where the contract was agreed to by the board, DCTA executives number 2, 3, and 4 resigned. Executive 2 went to work for, guess who? VIA, the contractor with whom she had spent the last 6 months, maybe a year and a half, negotiating the final details of the $34 million contract. Executive number 3 went to work for another DCTA contractor. In September of 2021, GO Zone begins. Initially with what they called sort of an initial, I can't remember the term, like a price break or something like this, an offer. It would be 4 free rides.
Promotional offer, yeah, I think was the term.
Thank you. It was to be 4 free rides and 75 cents per ride thereafter. And that, I think in the beginning, was only intended to be something like a 3 or 6 month promotion. But as Christine has told you, it continues. In December of 2021, the board decided to cut 3 routes of the initial 8. One of the 6 routes in Denton was cut, and the only 2 in Louisville were cut. In 2022, in January, one of the moderate representatives on the DCTA board, the county, as Christine told you, Denton County has 2 representatives. This kind of more moderate member was replaced with a county judge who's buddies with who is the DCTA chair, the kind of architect of the GO Zone replacement plan. And then in March, the DCTA CEO was forced out. He resigned officially. So within an 8-month period, the top 4 executives at DCTA resigned. Since we're here to, as part of the Transit Equity Day network, equity is an important part of our campaign and why we're fighting. First of all, and again, our apologies, we don't have the resource base to really have a lot of hard numbers on this, and we're mostly working from anecdotal evidence, much of it from our committee members. Some of the issues in equity, one, disability access. We know that wheelchair users, not only are GO Zone, as you've seen, was only 61% of the, no, 61% of the time there's you're unlikely to actually get a ride regardless of whether you need wheelchair access or not. And one of our committee members was stranded once here in Denton trying to get a GO Zone vehicle. Another aspect of equity is income. Low income people are stranded. If you don't have access to a telephone, you can't book a call. You can't just go up to a bus stop and hop on and pay your fare. It's not the way it was in the old days where you had payphones everywhere, right? There are, I don't think I've ever seen a payphone in Denton. So if you don't have access to a phone, you can't use public transportation. The digital divide is something that Bakari had asked us to look at. GO Zone, DCTA claim to have phone booking and cash payment, right? So people who don't have a smartphone or minutes data wouldn't be affected, but we haven't tested these claims. And if it's anything like GoZone's performance on any other the things that they're tracking, we expect that we would find also problems here. And finally, as far as race and ethnicity and protected classes go, the example we can give here, we're having not done sort of statistical analysis of where the rides are and these kinds of things yet. Kel was with me when we were riding the buses in Louisville, the two routes that have now been cut. I think most of the people I spoke with there either didn't have phones, and they're predominantly African American and Latino communities that were using those routes in Louisville. What the people we spoke with during our flyering sessions on the buses there in Louisville, what they're doing now, I don't know. But I think sort of a disproportionate impact and harm for African American and Latino communities is something that it seems pretty obvious to us here in our activist work. Next, we'll move on to I think it's our fourth section of our presentation about how we fought back against.
Just as a time check, we're at 11:40.
Thank you. Again, our timeline, we created our campaign in April of 2021. These are some of our successes. In June of 2021, we pressured City Council not to renew a contract to a consultant who had been pushing for the replacement of the buses by GoZone. In July, which was the meeting at which the GoZone, the cuts were supposed to happen, we had a mass call in to the board meeting for an hour before the meeting. We held up the meeting for an hour, basically with public comment to prevent the scheduled cuts. In October, we pressured Denton City Council to remove its representative to the DCTA board, its chair actually, who was a former 3-term mayor of Denton, and really the architect of the bus cuts. And I think this is probably the moment we're maybe proudest of and we were most effective.
I don't know if you caught the last city council meeting where they were attempting to remove Allison. We got Chris Watts removed and we got Allison McGuire put in. Allison is a wonderful woman, a fantastic advocate for transportation. She was recently recalled due to a redistricting effort that put her into a much more conservative district. And they just immediately yanked her. And so our council was trying to remove her from her DCTA board position. It did not happen. And there were immense amounts of salt from the conservative members of the city council over the Chris Watts call-in effort.
Yeah, I think that was our finest moment there, was getting him pulled off the board. And we did that through flyering at one of the places. We went to the community market, we went downtown, and the city council members told us they were getting dozens of emails from people we contacted to pull him off the board. He helped us a lot by saying it wasn't his role to say what Denton City Council does, and we had it on tape. But that was I think a great victory for our campaign. Unfortunately, he's back on City Council again, so we're gonna have to keep fighting these vampires off. In November, we presented our workers' plan for public transportation, where we called for the contract with VIA to be canceled and to have the GoZone be brought in-house. In December 2021, we pressured the DCTA board to keep routes. We were able to save 5 of 8 at that point. 2022, we presented our research on GoZone safety, which you can find on our website. We rallied the county courthouse in June to keep routes. In June, we formed the Coalition Against Predatory Microtransit and organized a labor conference on predatory microtransit. In July, we've held our first meeting of our coalition, and the Trust Network of Transit Rider Associations joined our coalition. In November, we partnered with Every Texan, it's a think tank in Austin, and the Texas AFL-CIO. We're trying to pass anti-corruption legislation during the upcoming Texas legislative session. All this revolving door stuff of executives going from DCTA to contractors, especially VIA, is something we need to stop. And then just recently, as Christine mentioned, we pressured City Council not to approve its resolution, removing its pro-bus route representative on the board. Finally, the last part of our presentation is, how do we achieve victory over predatory microtransit? We have some short-term goals. First of all, for DCTA, we have called for, of course, preventing further cuts to bus routes and to bring the GO zone system in-house. At the Texas state level, we are trying to pass anti-corruption legislation during the 2023 session. And at the federal level, what we're trying to do is turn off the tap on FTA funding for predatory microtransit projects. Really, the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars are poured into predatory microtransit from, it started with the Obama administration in 2016. And we want federal investigations as well by the Justice, Labor, and Transportation departments into labor violations, a 13C violation, and also Title VI violations associated with these projects. And finally, at the federal level, we are trying to hand off the coordination of our coalition against predatory microtransit. We just do not have the resources with our focus on local struggles to be able to be the coordinator of this group. And I see down below, it's kind of blocked by my thingy here, but I see we've got the makings of a media campaign all ready to go. Our website has our proposal for the formation of the coalition against predatory microtransit. And we've got some media materials all set up, right? We've got our lovely Van Shark that could be adapted however people might need to. And in addition, we've got some more subvertisement here, which we enjoyed. VIA, of course, is the biggest player in all this, the multinational corporation VIA. And we like this because it says, look, VIA go into these places and they call it Go Zone, or they call it Go Lake, or they call it this or that. It's VIA. It's a contract, it's outsourcing. Predatory microtransit is VIA, and it's unviable. It's unsafe, it's unhealthy, it harms workers, it harms riders, it harms the community, and it harms the environment. We are calling on any sympathetic organization to help us, and especially to help us to take up the coordination of this coalition, the coalition and the fight at the federal level. We don't have the resources to do it. We need help. So please contact the groups that you are part of, the groups you know, especially Transit Center. Transit Center, we had some contact with early in our campaign, and haven't really been able to maintain that since. So we need help to keep fighting predatory microtransit, and we hope you will help us do that. Christine or Kel or Terrell, do we have anything else from our committee you think these folks should know before we move on to the next part of the event?
Nothing for me.
Josh, do you think I could jump in?
Of course, I didn't see you. Will, welcome. Will's in our campaign and our committee as well.
My name's Will Hale. I'm a no bus cuts activist, Teamster, labor troublemaker in general. The only thing that I think wasn't mentioned was the only time we've seen predatory microtransit stopped, because we haven't stopped it, obviously, we're still fighting. But the only time we've ever seen it stopped is by a union contract. So Smart Local 607 in Los Angeles and Smart Local 23 in Santa Cruz both had language in their contract about part-time operators that allowed them to bring microtransit in-house and make those people union. So that's the only thing we haven't seen civic outcry stop this. You know, basically when these municipal bodies decide they're going to do this, they've decided they're going to do this, and they bulldoze any dissent. we've only ever seen this stopped via a union contract. So I think that's the only thing I had to add.
All right, Bakari. That's it from us. I think we'd be happy to take questions or hear y'all's comments and learn from you as well. Hopefully we've been able to sound the alarm and hopefully help prepare y'all for what might be coming to your town as well.
That you did. Thank you so much. And just another point to add on to that, I used to work in Dallas for DART. So I know too well about what they were trying to do. And I think it also speaks to the climate in Texas as far as how they feel towards transit, because I piloted something similar called GoPool, which was, it was more of an in-house form of microtransit. But when I heard about this, and especially also with what happened in Arlington years ago, which is a suburb south of Denton County, they completely erased their entire transit system in place of VIA. And to kind of put into context everything that they lost access to, they forfeited the transit system to service landmarks like University of Texas at Arlington, Six Flags Over Texas, Globe Life Field, AT&T Stadium, a lot of huge trip attractors and trip generators were lost. So this is not just a Denton County thing, but this has just been happening all over Texas. So yeah, it's good that you all have been, you had your hand on the pulse, and also getting to the people with this, and especially with it being really union based. Like you said, half of your members are rank and file. So I think it sends also another clear message of bringing this back to union membership. I do want to send it to a couple of questions, and I'll start with the questions that we had in the chat. The first question is from Marie. Joshua, Christy, Terrell, have you been able to get news coverage of this? So great you're tracking and calling it out. This is really a model.
Yeah, our website, nobuscutsdenton.org, has we've got links to the news coverage. So we've had some success, but the local press especially has ignored us, or they've taken our stuff from our press releases and not mentioned us as even part of the political discussion. So there's locally really no. But we've had some success with other agencies. Labor Notes, there's a nice piece on our campaign in Labor Notes, which you all may be familiar with. But we've tried a lot, and we're ignored.
I do want to give a quick shout out to Spectrum News. Spectrum News, I'm not sure if it's nationwide, but it seems like they've done an aggressive kind of market buy for running in restaurants or other places where it's background television. And so there is a friendly young journalist working with them who is fairly happy to cover our events. I've been on air a number of times with him, and I've had coworkers say like, hey, I saw you on the news and stuff. So it seems to be reasonably effective.
Wonderful. Our next question is from Sherry. Sherry asks, what are the 3 best solution alternatives, not including taking over the board that would take a decade, that we could work towards this for this area and others to have a minimum of 30-minute headways for this or other systems?
I don't have 3, I have 2. Hope that's okay. So what, maybe Josh will have the 3rd or someone else, but what I've seen, not yet working, but beginning to work. Number 1 is local electoral. As discussed, DCTA, is like many systems, has the issue where we are the transit center, like the center for possibility and effective transportation within the broader network, but we only get 1 vote on the board. SEPTA is a similar way. I think Philadelphia proper has 2 out of 9 SEPTA representatives, for example. And so the workaround to that is what UNT has been demonstrating so clearly for us. UNT is, of course, within DCTA's operating territory, but they plan their own routes. They purchase their own routes from DCTA, so DCTA operates them, and they don't have to provide the facilities like maintenance and dispatch and such, but they are planning and operating to some capacity their own routes. What is coming down the pipeline electorally for the city of Denton in this coming 2023 cycle is that I think transportation is going to wind up being a central focus for our local elections, with the intent of the city doing what UNT is already doing and purchasing and planning our own routes from our transit agency, sort of as a recognition that we don't have the power to fix the board dynamics of our agency, but we do have sort of a workaround available to us. And that might actually be the first Josh is hearing of this. But the other thing is that there is a presence from staff. Staff is in this at DCTA primarily because they support public transportation and they recognize the opportunities of it the same as we do. They are working the board. And so at the October board meeting, there was that graphic that I presented of a lot of 32% of GO Zone rides are overlapping with existing bus routes. And so they are kind of working into their presentations like, hey, we need to be fixing buses. And so just providing staff support and maintaining relationships with staff is important.
I have a third, if I could offer it. So one of the key features of our campaign has been to generate phone calls and emails and participation at meetings. Basically, when you're generating 40 emails, 20 phone messages a day, these people largely are lazy bureaucrats who signed up for an easy job. And so your job as an activist is to rob them of their peace until they do the right thing.
I love that. We have another question for Sarah from PIS. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi. Okay. Hello. So this is bringing up a lot for me because, we deal with school transportation and it should be a public service. It's funded by, the taxpayers. And in a lot of cases, it's a legal mandate for these students if their civil right. However, this is coming up with us. The busing is privatized. They, screwed up the wage structure years ago and did a bunch of other things to turn people off in the workforce, which is also ATU mostly. And there's such a shortage that what they've done, it started a couple summers ago, was to say to parents, oh, it's okay, we'll give you these ride share. And so it's a contract, it's different names, but Uber was definitely one of them this past summer. They actually, for a hot minute, had something called the Drivers Cooperative, which is, more worker run and disabled friendly and, conscientious and stuff. But that was like a quick contract. They got rid of it. But this is something that they're sort of shipping to parents who, or and local elected officials and community boards who are grilling this Office of People Transportation, saying, well, what are you going to do to get the kids to school? And they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll prioritize and we're looking at alternatives like rideshare, blah, blah, blah. Second thing about it, I could tell you some other ways that it ends up being useless. There are addresses in the borough of Queens that have a hyphen between, so like 123-47 58th Road or something like that. And the system gets glitchy with that and these people don't get picked up. We have a lot of, as you know, Texas governor sent a lot of people to New York who were recently arrived from places like Venezuela, and they have two last names, as is the custom. And people are already anticipating a lot of things where the name matching can go wrong, and that would also be a glitch because they might put, you know, the first one instead of the second one, or vice versa. The big thing though, when you say via, I would like to know more about anything you might know about sort of the, maybe I blinked and missed it, the origin of that country, I mean, company, you know, are they tied in with equity, hedge funds, or anything like that, or another country? Because VIA is the GPS system that they've been, you know, holding as a carrot to the parents as well, saying, well, you'll know where the bus is, which, you know, if it's still 2 hours away, that's not so great. And they've taken forever to get it installed and to roll it out and to, you know, it's a hot mess. So I'm really curious about VIA as a factor in some other multinational corporation type structure. And that's my question. Let it go with that. Thank you.
I can tell you briefly about VIA. In the limited work we've done, it's a multinational corporation headquartered in New York. They've got contracts all over the place. One look at their website, and you see they've got contracts in Berlin. They're all over the place. We were going to try to look some more. One thing we do know about VIA is they are. We're told by folks who have attended the APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. Evidently, VIA are there with their own suite and their own area at the conference, and wining and dining, and doing. Certainly, on the other end, they must be doing lobbying in Washington to get the federal money flowing towards them. So yeah, we don't know a lot about them, but more should be made public. That's for sure. Does anyone in our committee have anything to say about VIA, or maybe the other issues that Sarah was discussing?
Actually, yeah, I do have a little bit more information about VIA itself. So, for instance, two of their members, one is I don't have his last name, but his name is Andre something, and he's the head of the public policy at VIA. He also served 5.5 years in the Obama administration in some kind of committee or whatever. Another person was a lady named Tiffany. She used to work for the Boston mayor, Michelle Wu, who also has a thing with VIA. What's interesting about her is that she was the one who designed a lot of the software VIA uses. She was the president of Remix, and VIA bought them out, and that's where they got most of their algorithmic stuff. So you start to see like VIA has these different people, not only in VIA, but also have their hands in like local and national governments. We saw the same thing in DCTA right before VIA came in.
Yeah, that's right. They've got the former vice president, right? She's there now as their manager of customer relationships or something like that.
Yeah, and I think this is like important to know that they're still the last one around, because I remember 2017, 2019, we had a lot more of these companies, because I know in DC they had a company called Bridge, and they went belly up. And then Ford, General Motors Ford, they had a company called Chariot, which also went out of business, that were expanding to a lot of markets. So VIA, for whatever reason, is still existed just because of that overflow of people coming from this transit company and wanting to expand out to others. So yeah, I definitely get that. We had a question from Laura from Pittsburgh for Public Transit. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was a great presentation. I just wanted to flag that, or maybe reemphasize that a lot of times these the predatory microtransit shows up nested under a transit system redesign, network redesign, and also yeah, we've had particular challenges with the SMART grant that the federal government is providing, and it's not just to transit systems, it's like to municipalities and cities. Like we had this attempt to have autonomous vehicle microtransit that would have been competitive with public transit, but that was going to be seeded by SMART grant money. And I think why it's really challenging with this federal grant stuff is that it happens completely in darkness when like city and agency staff are applying for, there's no oversight process for what kind of grants are being applied for. And then the bodies that have to approve the budgets, like the city council or the agency boards, are loath to turn down money if they're awarded the grant. And so it's really hard then, because then you're just trying to fight the process of receiving money to be able to implement something. And I think really both changing the incentive process federally, as you guys mentioned, is really important, but also pushing our municipalities and transit agencies to have some kind of process by which the public can be made aware of some of the so-called opportunities that they're applying for in advance of those applications, particularly when it's things that ultimately offer up public resources. And just the last thing I'll say is that our city has also been piloting mobility as a service, and we see the privatization of public transit happening now beyond predatory microtransit in the form of vans, right? Like we see it in scooters, we see it in sidewalk delivery robots, we see it in autonomous vehicles, and just I think thinking about how we talk about public space too, and like the privatization of public space through these transportation modes that are deeply inequitable, and how I mean, obviously how problematic it is for people with disabilities. I think that what you're describing is also definitely a violation of the ADA. Like we were party to a lawsuit against Uber because their services, even as a private service that's not publicly run or funded, doesn't provide equitable or like sort of parity for people with disabilities. So just a lot of thoughts, but I just wanted to flag, I think this privatization pops up in a lot of different ways, and the things that trigger the process are manyfold, and so I think it's worth keeping an eye on all of them.
Absolutely. And we also have a comment from Sherry. Sherry, go ahead.
Okay, let me find, okay, I had to find the right button. This is some very, very insightful information. And the good news is we need to know where we are, and it's not a good place. The other good news is we have some excellent advocates on the battlefield. The bad news is the answer to most of our woes, unfortunately, are two things. I mean, the biggest problems is that money is the answer to the question, to our problem. And then the second thing obviously has to be transparency. So I have a couple of questions, and let me get this dinging to stop. And then I'll start with Bakari. Who runs that service up on Buford Highway here in Atlanta? And would you consider that predatory transit? From what I've heard, is pretty efficient. And if that's true, can it be duplicated and not corrupted? And the second question about Atlanta, or part B of that, is that English Avenue Vine City has a free service just for their area. It's a circular, and it is electric cars. I think they say they were donated 4 electric cars, and it takes people to the general area. So if you can answer those 2 quick questions, then I have 2 more.
Okay, yeah, I'll start with the first one. So for those of y'all who are not familiar with Metro Atlanta, our busiest bus route is Route 39, which goes up Buford Highway, which is a really huge international corridor. They also have, I wouldn't consider it predatory because it's a jitney. I think it's more of a jitney. It's called the Royal Bus Lines, and it's this small orange bus, and it transports people up and down the same route that MARTA's 39 goes to. And the reason I don't think it's predatory is because there's still a high ridership on the 39. Like it's still, after decades, still the highest ridden bus ridership. And that kind of shows the density of that area and the need for ridership in that area. And that was something I wanted to note about Denton County, was that Denton County is one of the fastest growing counties in America. And in one of the fastest growing metros in America's top 5. So you see that there is a huge, it's denser than most Texas counties. And it also represents a location, what Christine said, it's in this triangle. It's in this triangle of Denton, Dallas, Fort Worth. So there's already this whole setup to where it can be. Now, as far as the West Side thing, I think the circulators are good because with cities like Atlanta, and I'll also say for cities in Texas, the walkability is very difficult, and especially if you get a place that's really hilly or a place with no connectivity. So if you look at a map of Denton County, you'll see there's a lot of really suburban neighborhoods that don't really connect to each other. So circulators are different from predatory microtransit, to where it's not necessarily siphoning off riders, but it's actually circulating people to the actual modes where you can connect into a larger system. So like if there was something that could connect into the A train in Denton County, then that would be helpful. But the replacement of it also sends this signal that we don't really care about, you know, the whole digital divide, like people not having cell phones, people not having debit cards. I think that's where it's different versus like the Royal Bus Line, where it's cash. It's you pay $1 and you get on board. And then also similar to MARTA, where you have 2 options. Now going to be 3 options in the future, because now you'll be able to pay with your smartphone. So I think it's different in those respects. But also to what Sarah was mentioning earlier, you don't want that to be the only option. You don't want that to be the only option because they can't afford to get any other option, because VIA, who is given like thousands of dollars to whatever campaign, could just schmooze their way in and say, yes, we can get this contract because we paid you. You really have to look at the scenarios with it. And I wish I could have gotten Philly Transit Riders Union on here, because they were also experiencing that in Philly, as far as Northeast Philly. But now their solution to that is opening up a system that hasn't been talked about for a long time, and that was the Roosevelt Boulevard subway. That literally will provide that fixed routes service that will get people rapidly into Center City and other areas of Philadelphia. So I don't think it necessarily is. Now, what we need to watch about is the MARTA Reach service. Now, that is something that you need to worry about, because it's in-house with MARTA. But if they ever did decide to contract out to VIA, then that's where the problem arises, because what they're doing now is they're exploring all these areas where you don't have fixed route service and wondering how can we cheapen this deal but still provide service to them. So I think that's where the concern is that you don't want to cheapen out trying to have a mobility solution.
Okay, so what is California doing that we could learn from? I heard about the 75-cent bus that they have. I know in downtown LA, because I've ridden it, they have a circular that is $1. So I'm wondering if that's supplemented. But I also, when I was in LA, I saw that obviously they have like 5 different systems, and some kind of way they work. But in downtown LA, you know, is they're picking up all of these people, taking them to all these different places, because there are different needs for different systems. So how do we come up with some type of model that is somewhat accountable while we try to get the right elected officials in place? And along with that question is, who is it, if anyone, in the state legislature in Texas, if not in the Triangle area, who really is pro-transit or not? Or is there any congressman or congresswoman in Texas that can help with this situation? Because Memphis has something similar where, you know, they really need, so how can we learn or kind of start with a short-term plan versus just always have, you know, more issues? How can we do that?
Well, I'll start with the first one. I think you're referring to Dash, and I think that may be a county service. That's something. And I'll also mention that in downtown LA, I think they have a free circulator bus. And that's just because downtown is huge. Like, if you've ever been to downtown LA, it's huge. It's huge. So it's difficult to get from one point to the other. And
It is.
you do want to create that walkability, like where you want to get from the fashion district and you want to get to the other side where Union Station is. I think that helps. And like, I was there back in September for the Young Workers Convention on Climate. It takes forever to get anywhere around LA, like on average, hour and a half, 2 hours. So that circulator really helps when you get to that point and you don't want to finish on that same vehicle because they're going to be making stops, especially it's like if it's an express service, they're going to be making stop at the stop at the stop at the stop. Whereas the circulator will go around to points of interest or points where they know they're going to have a high boarding and alignment. So I think that's important to recognize as far as that. But I think a part of that is business improvement districts, or in Georgia, they're called community improvement districts. They also can pay for that service. So for example, like the, what's the one in Buckhead, the Buck Shuttle. That's
yeah. They do. It comes to pick up people from the MARTA station, and I think it takes people to Lenox and some other places.
Right. That's that last mile connectivity part of it. Of yes, now that I got off at this station, I don't want to walk, and especially if it's 90 degrees and the humidity's up past 70%. No one's gonna
Suppose you
walk
can't walk, like right now, I have on a boot because I have tendonitis.
Right.
So suppose you can't walk.
Right.
So don't they, what, you know, I haven't lived in Chicago in a while, but you know, Chicago seems to, you know, be doing a better job than some other folks. I don't know if they have circulars or not, but I just always know when I was in Chicago, it was like rare if I ever thought about driving downtown, because there are 3 different options to get there: the bus, the L, or the Metro. So obviously that's heavy rail, along with an elevated line. So how can we learn from these cities and really start to get some traction?
I mean, the biggest part that I would say is show them that it's profitable, honestly.
But it's not.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago's a different ball game, just because Chicago's a transit legacy city. They've had that since early 1800s. And especially the way they had it, they made it where everything loops and then goes out. Everything loops downtown and then it goes out. And I was there right before Thanksgiving. It was lovely. And I also found out they're putting in infill stations. So they're really trying to make the access much better.
Right.
Yeah, and it makes sense because the density is definitely going to increase in Chicago and all these other cities. Like, and I mentioned that about cities down south. A lot of these cities are growing because you're getting a lot of people who are migrating from up north to these southern environments that don't have a lot of the transit infrastructure that the cities up north do. So I think it's good to show them that, hey, you can build transit-oriented development, or you can build a lot of these developments for these newcomers and put it around transit to where they have the second option and driving is not the only thing in town. And I think that's something also for Denton. Like if Denton's experiencing this growth, then I think that's also something to figure out with the A train. Yeah, Christine, you have something?
As much as transit-oriented development is the goal, we have so many barriers to it. We have development code where we recently, depending on the style of restaurant and bar, up to 4x our parking requirements. We have parking minimums all across the city, except our downtown, like our small little downtown district, which is of course the part of Denton that everybody loves, and everybody's like, wow, I wish there were more of this. But then we legally forbid it in so many ways. Our impact fees are, the city pays 75% of impact fees, and we under evaluate for the impact cost of suburban sprawl and all of these interlocking issues. And that's kind of, I think, one area that we need to be working on, is this cooperative understanding across different government agencies. We have a central council of governments, we have DCTA, we have our independent school district, and I think there needs to be more cooperation and understanding on why development happens in the way that it does. How are we incentivizing urban sprawl, and how do we change those things, and what are the benefits of doing so?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for No Bus Cuts Denton. Y'all had an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for spreading this information. And we would definitely will tweet out this video as well as with everything else you're doing. But we wish you all the best, and we thank you. And please come back again. We'd love to have you back.
But did they answer the question about whether or not they have any state legislators or congressmen that are actually pro-transit that could help?
I could speak to that, Sherry. We're looking for them.
Okay.
We've got allies in Austin who are helping us try to put together legislation against corruption at DCTA, and we're hoping that they're going to be able to find some folks who can help us, because at least the local representatives are not. I think they know about us, but haven't done anything to help. So that's where we are with that. The way we approach things here is, we know it's a fight on the ground, and we're not going to. That's how we'll win. We'll win with grassroots organizing and pressure from below, so that we're not going to them and asking them for favors. They're coming to us and asking us what we want them to do. So that's our philosophy, and I think we're going to keep on with it.
Well, thank you for your hard work. So, we just have to keep brainstorming, shy of, cutting people's brain open, putting in good sense, or just removing them like you did with the young lady with Allison, where you were able to keep her on the board. Kudos to you for that. I'm sure that was difficult, but it's a game changer. So keep up the good work.
Absolutely.
I would say that one thing to understand about Texas transportation is that TxDOT is one of the more powerful dots in the country, and they are historically rabidly anti-transit. There has been a lot of pressure on them. Farm and City is a statewide organization that's done excellent work on this, to kind of bring them around, and it's happening slowly, and there's a lot of ground to make up, but there is some state level coordination around making the legislature more transit friendly. It's just going to be a very hard battle.
But about
that's what we do. We battle.
Absolutely. No Bus Cuts Denton, thank you so much for joining us today.